This is Love Notes, daily devotions from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. Grace and peace to you. Our text today is Luke, the 18th chapter, verses 31 to 43. Jesus now turns from the crowds and takes the 12, his closest circle of followers, and he says to them, "See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and everything that is written about the Son of Man by the prophets will be accomplished. For he will be handed over to the Gentiles, the Romans, and he will be mocked and insulted and spat upon. After they have flogged him, they will kill him, and on the third day he will rise again." This is the third time Jesus has predicted that this is the path that he will walk in Jerusalem. And they still don't get it. They don't understand it. Maybe it's just impossible to understand. It tells us in verse 34 that they understood nothing about all these things. In fact, what he said was hidden from them. Now, does that mean that God had hidden things from them, obscured their minds? Not in the causal sense, I don't think. They just aren't capable of thinking in terms of a suffering servant, a prophet who will die. Because for them, death is the final word. And so they will not understand what he has said until the resurrection. And resurrection is a revelation. It's not history. It's a revelation of what the world is to be and what it will be like. We should note that Jesus' prophecy about his path spends more time talking about his suffering and death than about the resurrection. There is no denial of death in the mission of Jesus. There is no way around it. You can't skip from Good Friday to the resurrection, as we so often do in our worship. 1,000 people will show up for church on Easter Sunday. Barely 100 will come to Good Friday. But that's backwards. Because what Jesus reveals in the resurrection is the truth of his path and the truth of his way. And the path leads through suffering and death so that it might be overcome. Resurrection isn't just the promise of some kind of holiday or escape from this world. But the disciples can't see that yet. They are blind. They are blind to what Jesus is trying to show them. So, in verse 35, as he approaches Jericho, the last town before the ascent up to Jerusalem, the town where the rich man and the Samaritan were headed before, the town where Joshua entered with all of the people into the promised land and walked around the city until the walls fell. They approach Jericho, and a blind man is sitting on the roadside. Don't think it's just a coincidence that Luke places the story about a blind man, physically blind, just after we're told that the disciples don't understand anything. That's a spiritual blindness. And when Luke does this, or any of the gospel writers, it means that these two stories are going to interpret one another. So the blind man is sitting by the roadside begging. That's all he can do. When he heard a crowd going by, he asked what was happening. He can't see, just like the disciples. He doesn't know what's going on. So they told him, Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. That's what they called him, Jesus of Nazareth, the rabbi from up in Galilee. But the blind man shouts out and says, not Jesus of Nazareth, but Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. This is a new title applied to Jesus. We get kind of an ironic twist here that this blind man can see something that the disciples apparently cannot, that Jesus is the son of David, and he cries out for mercy. Those who were in front sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he shouted even more loudly. These are like the disciples who are keeping the children away from Jesus, and Jesus will have none of it. The man shouts all the more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." He may be physically blind, but his spiritual eyes are working on all cylinders. So Jesus stood still and ordered the man to be brought to him. And when he came near, he asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" He said, "Lord, let me see again." Jesus said to him, "Receive your sight. Your faith has saved you." Receive your physical sight. Your spiritual sight has saved you. Your trust in Jesus, the Son of David, the Messiah to come, has saved you. And immediately it says he regained his physical sight and then followed Jesus, glorifying God. And all the people, when they saw it, praised God as well. Jesus stops when he sees a man on the Jericho road, and he helps him. He heals him, just like the Samaritan in his parable. The disciples, whose eyes work perfectly well, cannot see that Jesus is really the Messiah. And this blind man, who cannot see physically, sees that he is. He leaves the story with both sight intact. His eyes and his heart and his mind and his soul are all open to the Jesus who stands before him as Son of David. He calls him his own, and he follows him. O Lord, open our eyes. Amen.